The laughter echoed through the bright hospital hallway just as the morning sun poured through the tall glass windows, turning the polished floors into mirrors of gold and white. Patients watched quietly from their wheelchairs while doctors hurried between departments, pretending not to notice what was happening. In the middle of it all stood a young nurse named Maren Holt, clutching a stack of patient charts against her chest. She lowered her eyes as another sarcastic remark drifted toward her, cutting deeper than anyone realized. She had become the easiest target in the emergency department simply because she never argued back. But no one in that hospital knew the truth about the quiet woman they mocked every day. No one knew that before sunset, a decorated Navy sniper would walk through those automatic doors, stop in front of everyone, salute her with tears in his eyes, and quietly say the words that would freeze the entire building. "Your father sent me." Before we continue this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to Kindness Tales if you believe that every act of compassion deserves a second chance. Your support helps these stories reach people who need hope the most. Maren Holt had worked at Harbor Ridge Medical Center for almost 4 years. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, carrying a simple lunch packed in a faded blue container and wearing the same carefully ironed uniform. She never complained when others swapped difficult shifts with her. She stayed late without asking for overtime and volunteered for patients that everyone else avoided. Elderly patients smiled whenever they saw her because she remembered every birthday, every favorite song, and every family story they shared. Children stopped crying when she sat beside them because somehow her calm voice made every frightening room feel a little safer. Yet despite all of this, many of her coworkers considered her invisible. Some believed kindness was weakness. Others mistook silence for insecurity. They whispered that she would never become a senior nurse because she lacked confidence. They laughed about her old car, her worn shoes, and the modest apartment where she lived alone. Few realized those worn shoes had walked countless miles carrying groceries to lonely veterans after long shifts. Few knew she donated part of every paycheck to families struggling with medical bills. Maren never spoke about those things because she believed kindness lost its beauty the moment it demanded applause. The only photograph on the small locker inside the staff room showed Maren standing beside an older man wearing an old denim jacket and a warm smile. His name was Rowan Holt, her father. Years earlier he had worked as a mechanic in a small coastal town. He never became wealthy, but everyone remembered him because he fixed vehicles for families who could not afford repairs. If someone lacked money, Rowan simply shook their hand and told them to pay kindness forward someday. He believed every person deserved dignity regardless of circumstance. When Maren was 16, Rowan became seriously ill. The treatments emptied every savings account they had. Maren watched her father smile through unimaginable pain, always thanking every nurse who entered his room. During one difficult afternoon, he gently squeezed her hand and whispered that the strongest people were never the loudest. He told her the world often rewarded confidence before character, but character lasted longer. Those words became the foundation of her life. After Rowan passed away, Maren entered nursing school determined to become the kind of caregiver who treated every patient like family. She graduated with excellent marks, yet she remained humble, believing the title on her badge mattered less than the comfort she gave others. One bright spring morning, the emergency department became unusually busy after a chain reaction highway accident. Ambulances arrived one after another. Nurses rushed between trauma rooms while doctors coordinated emergency procedures. Maren worked without stopping for hours, comforting frightened families, cleaning wounds, preparing medications, and reassuring patients who feared the worst. Even under enormous pressure, she never raised her voice. Still, during a brief pause, several coworkers mocked her quiet nature again. They joked that she looked more like a frightened student than an experienced nurse. Another suggested she would never survive real pressure. Maren simply smiled politely and returned to checking on an elderly patient whose frightened hands had not stopped shaking since the accident. Outside the hospital, a dark government vehicle quietly entered the parking area. A tall man stepped out wearing civilian clothes, though his posture revealed years of military discipline. His name was Commander Elias Mercer, a retired Navy sniper whose service record remained respected across the country. His broad shoulders carried invisible scars from years of protecting others, and although retirement had softened his appearance, his alert eyes missed nothing. He walked calmly through the hospital lobby carrying an old leather envelope that looked decades old. Security greeted him respectfully after confirming his appointment with hospital administration. Yet instead of heading toward the executive offices, Elias asked one simple question. He wanted to find Nurse Maren Holt. Word spread quickly. Staff assumed he must be an investigator, a government official, or perhaps the relative of a patient. Curious faces peeked through hallway windows as Elias approached the emergency department. Maren was kneeling beside an elderly woman, adjusting a blanket and gently explaining medication instructions. She had no idea someone was watching quietly from the entrance. Elias waited until she finished helping the patient before stepping forward. The department slowly became silent. Doctors stopped writing notes. Nurses looked up from computer stations. Patients turned toward the unusual visitor. Elias stood perfectly straight before Maren. Then, to everyone's complete surprise, the retired sniper raised his hand in a respectful military salute. His voice trembled slightly. He told her that her father had sent him. Confusion filled the room. Maren stared at him, unable to understand. Her father had been gone for nearly 12 years. Elias gently handed her the weathered leather envelope. Inside rested an old handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed with age. Her father's familiar handwriting covered every line. Tears immediately filled Maren's eyes before she even reached the second sentence. Years earlier, during Rowan Holt's illness, another patient had occupied the neighboring hospital bed. That patient had been Elias Mercer, recovering from devastating injuries suffered during a classified overseas mission. While everyone admired Elias for his military heroism, Rowan admired something else entirely. He noticed a lonely man haunted by invisible battles. Every afternoon Rowan shared stories, jokes, and quiet encouragement with the wounded soldier. When Elias struggled with painful rehabilitation, Rowan reminded him that survival carried responsibility. He insisted that healing meant finding reasons to keep serving others, even without a uniform. Before Rowan passed away, he asked Elias for one promise. If life ever allowed it, he wanted Elias to check on Maren years later, not to rescue her financially or solve her problems, but simply to remind her that kindness never disappeared. It traveled through people, changing lives long after its source was gone. Elias had carried that promise through deployments, retirement, and countless years. Only recently had he finally located Maren. Silence covered the emergency department. Many co-workers lowered their eyes. For the first time, they realized the quiet nurse standing beside them had inherited extraordinary strength from an extraordinary father. Elias continued explaining how Rowan had changed his life. Following recovery, Elias established a non-profit organization helping wounded veterans rebuild civilian lives. Hundreds of former service members had received counseling, education, housing assistance, and emotional support because one dying mechanic refused to let another man surrender to hopelessness. Every success traced back to Rowan Holt. Maren could barely breathe as memories flooded her heart. She remembered evenings helping her father repair bicycles for neighborhood children. She remembered him quietly leaving groceries on struggling families' porches without revealing his name. She remembered how he insisted kindness should remain anonymous whenever possible. She had spent years wondering whether anyone outside their small town remembered him. Now she discovered his compassion had reached people across the country. Hospital administrators soon learned why Elias had come. His Veterans Foundation planned to donate enough money to completely renovate Harbor Ridge Medical Center's aging rehabilitation wing. However, Elias attached one condition. The new rehabilitation center would carry Rowan Holt's name. And he wanted Marin involved in designing every patient care program because she embodied the values her father had lived by. The announcement stunned everyone. The same nurse others ignored now stood at the center of one of the largest charitable gifts the hospital had ever received. News crews arrived during the afternoon. Administrators asked Marin to stand beside Elias for photographs. She politely accepted only after ensuring every patient under her care had received lunch and medication first. That simple decision impressed everyone even more. Over the following weeks, attitudes throughout the hospital quietly changed. Co-workers who once mocked Marin began noticing the countless unnoticed things she did each day. She remembered patients' grandchildren's names. She repaired broken reading glasses with tiny tools she carried. She wrote encouraging notes for families spending sleepless nights in waiting rooms. She comforted grieving relatives long after her shift officially ended. None of these acts appeared on performance reports. Yet together they revealed the true measure of a caregiver. One afternoon, a newly hired nursing student nervously admitted she feared she was not talented enough for the profession. Instead of giving a motivational speech, Marin simply invited the student to join her rounds. Hour after hour, the student watched Marin treat every patient with equal respect, whether they were wealthy business owners, homeless veterans, frightened children, or lonely retirees. By evening, the student understood something textbooks could never teach. Medicine healed bodies. Kindness often healed everything else. Months later, the Rowan Holt Rehabilitation Center officially opened beneath bright blue skies and warm daylight. Veterans, hospital staff, local families, and former patients gathered outside beneath colorful banners fluttering gently in the breeze. Flowers lined the entrance while children handed small flags to elderly veterans arriving for the ceremony. Elias stood quietly near the podium, looking toward the clear morning sky with gratitude. When Marin unveiled the bronze dedication plaque bearing her father's name, applause echoed across the courtyard. Many people cried openly. Not because of the building. Not because of the donation. But because one ordinary man's compassion had outlived him by many years. As the celebration ended, Marin quietly slipped away from the crowd and visited the peaceful garden behind the rehabilitation center. She sat beside a blooming tree where butterflies drifted lazily through the warm afternoon air. Holding her father's letter against her heart, she finally understood what he had tried to teach her all those years ago. Kindness was never small. Every gentle word, every patient smile, every unnoticed sacrifice planted seeds that might bloom decades later in places we would never see. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Kindness Tales so together we can keep spreading stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with one simple phrase: kindness always returns. Your words may encourage someone reading the comments who desperately needs hope today. Marin looked once more toward the busy hospital where ambulances continued arriving and nurses hurried through another ordinary day. Most people would never know the incredible story behind the quiet woman walking those hallways. They would simply see a nurse carrying charts with a gentle smile. But somewhere in every patient she comforted, every frightened child she calmed, every lonely veteran she listened to, Rowan Holt's legacy continued living. And perhaps that is the greatest measure of a life, not the wealth left behind or the recognition received, but the kindness that keeps traveling through hearts long after we are gone. On that beautiful sunny afternoon, beneath a clear blue sky, Marin smiled through grateful tears and walked back inside the hospital, ready to care for the next person who needed hope, proving once again that the quietest hearts often carry the loudest legacy.